Each we know has cost many their lives. Indeed, 1/3 of the population is believed to have fled Robert Mugabe's rule. The BBC has been banned from reporting there, but undercover reporter Sue Lloyd-Roberts has just returned from the country with this extended report containing extraordinary pictures of life for ordinary people in that country.
These are the pictures that Robert Mugabe does not want us to see. Children so malnourished that they're beyond the point of rescue. In what was once one of the richest countries in Africa, people here are dying for want of food. Here a child is losing her hair and skin, a symptom of the most extreme kwashiorkor, or vitamin deficiency. Many of the children have contracted AIDS from their mothers, and with their immune system further weakened by malnutrition, they won't survive. And hundreds of children who could be saved are just not getting here.
The space is not enough. The numbers are increasing nearly every day. And there are so many children in the rural areas who cannot access to come to the hospital due to transport problems and financial problems. And definitely at the end they will die without having assistance from the hospital.
They wait all day in queues for food. It seldom arrives. About the only growth industry in the country is funerals. No wonder when the odd shipment of petrol arrives, they queue up to leave.
Zimbabwe was a beautiful country. We had everything here in Zimbabwe. But now the country have really collapsed. It's nothing. It's a shame to be in this country.
Inside Zimbabwe, there's nothing but queues. With 80% of people out of work, they have all day to wait for petrol, bread, cooking oil, or the African staple, mealie meal, often to no avail. Supermarket shelves have been empty for months. The government tackles the problem by freezing prices, but to a level where, managers say, they can no longer afford to buy the stock. I had to snatch these shots of nothing while no one was looking. The last time I was in Zimbabwe, I was arrested for filming a bread queue, because Robert Mugabe wants the world to believe there are no problems here. Reporters caught working illegally get sent to prison, and so these people's tragedy must be told with the help of local cameramen, through car windows, and by talking to people in the safety of their homes.
I blame the government of Robert Mugabe for all this, because he is the one who is causing all these problems.
James's family is typical of Zimbabwe. His brother and sister have died of AIDS, and he now supports 5 children, in addition to 3 of his own. His mother has come to town to look for food for the surviving grandchildren, but so far this week, all they've found is porridge.
There's no mealie meal, no cooking oil, even bread. We have to queue for bread maybe for 5 hours. Sometimes you queue, but you don't get anything. Most of the times we are disadvantaged by policemen in uniform and soldiers. If they hear that there is something, let's say there is mealie meal, they come there and they pretend to be organizing the queues. Then they start buying things before us. So most of the time it is the police and the soldiers who loots everything in the shop. So it's very hard for us here in town.
2 years ago, Robert Mugabe ordered the destruction of thousands of homes in Zimbabwe's towns. The government claimed that Operation Murambachina, or cleaning out the filth, was to combat crime. But the victims say that soldiers and bulldozers deliberately targeted traditional opposition areas. Mugabe appointed his own city council and allowed the urban infrastructure to collapse. People are now crowded into the remaining townships, 10 to a room, with no electricity or fresh running water, and with untreated sewage pouring from the dilapidated buildings. It flows out onto the ground, a short distance from where, desperate for drinking water, they've sunk makeshift boreholes. Doctors are bracing themselves for a catastrophe which they're ill-equipped to deal with.
I think an outbreak of cholera in this situation, with the lack of resources and medical staffing and so forth, could be potentially dangerous and disastrous, and could lead to very high mortalities, particularly in vulnerable groups such as people suffering from HIV/AIDS, children and the elderly.
Here to a Catholic mission hospital funded by donations from abroad. In a country that once boasted a model of public health care in Africa, maternal and infant mortality rates are rising fast.
We come to the hospital to find what we can't get at home. At home, there is hunger. There is no food for us or our babies. The government gives us nothing.
The country's cemeteries are expanding at an alarming rate. According to the World Health Organization, the life expectancy of a man in Zimbabwe today is 37 years, a woman 34. As an illegal in the country, I can't ask the government how people are expected to avoid an early death in Zimbabwe today, but I found an opposition leader prepared to attempt an answer.
That's the million-dollar question. There's no food in shops, there is no water in people's houses, there is no electricity. Robert Mugabe and his cronies at State House have taken this country back to 1923. We are worse off as a country. We are worse off than some stateless countries like Somalia, Liberia, Darfur, Sudan and so forth. That's the tragedy of this country, that has been taken to these levels where our hospitals are fighting cholera, dysentery and so forth. It's unbelievable.
Zimbabwe has become a country of barrows, buckets and bags. No one leaves home without something to carry, an unexpected delivery. And people barter. If you find 2 bags of mealie meal, you'll go to barter points in the city and swap one for a bag of sugar. People scavenge in rubbish tips and dig up anywhere that might grow food. Using water left over from washing to nurture vegetables in the townships, while the more affluent dig up their once manicured lawns and use swimming pool water for irrigation and domestic chores. John would be the first to admit that the suffering of the white middle classes is insignificant compared to that of unemployed blacks. But they all have to live with the uncertainty of where Robert Mugabe is going to attack next. The once busy white suburbs of Harare are practically deserted. Half the whites left after the attacks on commercial farmers, and the Foreign Office is preparing emergency evacuation plans for the remaining 20,000 or so Britons who still live here. But drive to the north of Harare and it looks more like colonial days. Sprinklers and domestic servants in abundance, and for a country with the fastest shrinking economy in the world, new and palatial houses for the ZANU-PF elite, Robert Mugabe's cronies as the opposition calls them. In the shopping mall close by, it's hard to believe that there's such misery only around the corner. For the chosen few, the government allows profiteering on foreign exchange in a time of hyperinflation, while it prints ever more money and creates more inflation.
These are people who don't really have a close understanding of economics and business, and whose prime motivation is political survival.
Solve the crisis in your country, Mr. President.